Namaskar, good evening. Before I begin, can you just very quickly let me know that you can hear me all right and see the screen behind me all right so that we can very quickly begin. Good evening, Mandeep. So the whole nation is in fact observing Kargil Vijay Diwas today. And so our story this evening begins in 1947 when the British were forced to vacate the subcontinent and two nations came into being, India and Pakistan. One nation that focused completely on economic growth, development, protection of rights, and the other nation singularly focused on the cause of Kashmir. Now today we have come to this time period where we discuss the Kargil War and look at it from the lens of treachery versus valor. The treachery of a nation backstabbing another one just after promising in the context of the Lahore Declaration. And then the valor of the Indian Armed Forces, that they fought not just against the enemy, but also the terrain, the hostile environment. So on this very special day, we take a look at the entire timeline of the Kargil War, the reasons leading up to it, the obvious reasons, and thereafter the whole mechanisms that were put in play to repel the illegal invaders, intruders, infiltrators in Indian territory. And thereafter, the changes that occurred, say, in the Indian security apparatus as a result of the Kargil War. My name is Bhuvan A and I welcome each one of you. Good evening, all of you. Most welcome. Thank you for joining. So let's straight away get into the discussion. Kargil Vijay Diwas, the war, in fact, that does seem to defy all odds. Well, straight away, if you want to go ahead and join me on this Telegram channel of mine, well, you can scan this barcode and join me on my Telegram channel. At the same time, let me inform all those of you who are appearing for the civil services for the next year, 2024. Well, this special prelims to interview course by StudyIQ will be closing admissions on the 31st of July, 6 p.m. Head over to the website, take a look at the course deliverables, sign up for it ASAP before the seats run out. All right, let's get into our discussion for the day. Now, before we get into what happened during the Kargil War, well, it is important for us to understand the motivation of Pakistan. Well, what indeed caused it to take such unilateral measures? So if you take a look at it, the first statement that I have for you is quite obvious. Pakistan's illegal, illogical obsession with Kashmir, which has seen the countries, in fact, engage in almost 4 wars up until now. And all of them, interestingly, but not very surprisingly, started by Pakistan. And again, in all of them, expectedly, well, they eat the humble pie, right? So, India and Pakistan, well, before 1999 had fought 3 wars. Each time, again, as I told you, hostilities beginning from the other side. Now, the Kargil War has to be understood from the point of treachery. And not just treachery between two nations, India and Pakistan. You're also looking at treachery within the political system, the military establishment of Pakistan. So yes, Pakistan and India, you do consider that yes, we had the more famous now Lahore Declaration, the Lahore Agreement. And just in a few days after that historic agreement was signed, well, you found that Pakistan backed infiltrators, as it was claimed, which later turned out to be servicemen of Pakistan Army, illegally lodged themselves in Indian territory. So that's the treachery number 1 from Pakistan to India. Thereafter, you are also looking at treachery from the then Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan Army, Pervez Musharraf, who went on later to stage a coup, become the President of Pakistan. Well, he was also complicit in treachery, as he did not take his particular political class, his establishment along in this decision. In fact, the subsequent reports, the books released thereafter say that, well, the political class was in complete darkness regarding the ambitions of this particular individual, along with his few cronies. And at the same time, you're not just looking at treachery and this mistrust, this distrust that existed between, say, Pakistan Army and the Pakistan political establishment. You're also looking at mistrust and distrust between the Pakistan military and the different arms within it. All of this put together is the primary cause of this crisis. Now let's go ahead. And so straight away what you realize is that in 1998, a very important time, a sensitive time, as India goes ahead tests and becomes a nuclear power. Pakistan has already been in the works, and so suddenly you find that there are two nations now who are nuclear armed, nuclear capable, and now have come to this particular stalemate. Right? Good evening guys, all of you, most welcome, most welcome. All right. So what do you find? After the signing of the Lahore Declaration between Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, straight away, a few days after that, treachery number one from Pakistan's side, as Pakistan occupies the winter vacated posts of the Indian Army. Now, what would ideally happen? So, all of these high altitude posts would be vacated in the winter months. Thereafter, soldiers would go back to it once the ice would melt, once the snow would recede, once the conditions would become habitable for the people to go and patrol there, guard the borders there. However, this advantage was taken off by Pakistan, as they claimed that illegal mujahideens, in fact, have now occupied Indian posts. What later turned out to be mujahideens belonging to Pakistan Army dressed as Kashmiri militants. So once again, when you go forward, what you realize is that this whole operation of placing these mujahideens, these terrorists, dressed as terrorists, actually Pakistan servicemen, well, this was part of a larger operation from the Pakistan government, the Pakistan military, in fact, called Operation Badr. So Pakistani forces, disguised as terrorists, infiltrate on the Indian side and take over the Indian Army's winter vacated posts. Now, what is the larger aim here? Is it just to occupy these posts? No, not obviously. What they are looking at is to strike at the very heart of India. National Highway 1A that runs from Srinagar to Leh, well, that is directly in the line of sight, the line of fire from these posts that the Pakistan illegal forces are now occupy. They are also looking at isolating Indian Army troops from the Siachen Glacier, a very sensitive, a critical area that India had gained for itself in Operation Meghdoot in 1984. Pakistan now also looking to avenge that through this Kargil excursion that they have embarked upon. And then also, finally, to force India to negotiate settlement of the Kashmir issue, try to internationalize this issue that is not in the realm of the international community at all. So with this three-pronged strategy, the Pakistan-backed Mujahideens, the Pakistan Army, occupy the higher ridges in the Indian territory. What happens next? Well, first, the intrusion is detected by a local villager, Tashi Namgyal, who has in fact etched his name in the history books, the first shepherd to notice the intrusions, goes and reports it to the local army units, and straight away, within 48 hours, you have a particular team, a recon mission that is sent out, being led by Captain Saurav Kalia, along with 4 other Indian Army personnel. And what you find is that they engage in a brief gunfight, run out of ammunition, thereafter are captured by these forces from the other side of the border. And now what has been chronicled in detail is that they were tortured till death. Again, a gross violation of the Geneva Convention, which talks about ethical soldiering. Right? So this is the story developing. First, treachery. Thereafter, this barbarism put on display by mutilating an Indian Army soldier. Thereafter, what you find is that by the 10th of the May, it has now been confirmed by the Indian Army that yes, large-scale intrusions have happened across various sectors. And you are looking at the 3 sectors in this particular area. First up, you have the Mushko sector, thereafter the Dras and the Batalik. So with these 3 sectors completely in the hands of the Pakistani Army, well, obviously this particular route, National Highway 1A, is completely threatened. So what happens next? Counter-offensive begins on the 14th of July. In fact, on the 14th of May. The flushing out operations begin. Large-scale reconnaissance missions are sent out to understand the extent of the intrusions first. Right? But, however, in fact, what you find is that in spite of such gross provocation, in spite of such absolute brazen backstabbing, the Indian government exercises immense self-restraint. You have the then Prime Minister, late Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who in fact stipulates that under no condition will even one soldier or one aircraft of the Indian Air Force cross the line of control. Whatever operations have to be undertaken to flush out these individuals rather than going and, say, capturing them from behind. Military tactics would tell you that it's easier to lay a siege if you have to go and attack from behind. However, that was not possible. Bear in mind, this is in the harsh, rough terrains of the Himalayas. What happens next? So, straight away you can understand the geographical advantage. Like I told you at the very beginning, the Indian Army was not just fighting an enemy, it was also fighting the terrain, the weather, the climate. In fact, a popular adage goes that the mountains favor the defenders. Common sense will tell you that attacking uphill puts an attacker at a significant disadvantage. Well, but once again, because you're looking at going uphill, you're exposed from all flanks, all sides. In spite of this, what you find is that the tales of valor that come out of this particular crisis, well, that serves to inspire all of us countrymen and women. You find that individuals with gross disregard to personal safety, carrying out some of the most daring missions in the most harshest conditions to win this victory for the Republic of India. Right? So infantry assaults would have to be undertaken at a very high altitude. We are facing heavy enemy fire from all sides. All right? And that the maximum available air power will now be required. So this realization now dawns on the Indian side that, well, you can't just have the Indian Army lead this particular offensive. You are going to need support from the Indian Air Force. Thus you find that Operation Safed Sagar, now launched by the Indian Air Force, to flush out and to support the Indian Army's missions in expelling these illegal invaders. The released documents thereafter also show now that the Indian Air Force was in fact minutes away from launching a full-scale strike at the Chaklala Air Base and making sure that this would have escalated the theatre of war by significant proportions. However, once again what you find is that the Indian government exercises immense restraint in the face of such hostility. Right? So, the cabinet approval for the airstrikes comes, and thus you have the first airstrikes launched on the 26th of May under Operation Safed Sagar. Now here was Indian Army with Operation Vijay. You have the Indian Air Force with Operation Safed Sagar. Indian Navy didn't also want to be left out and thus launched Operation Talwar, which is sword in English, essentially looking at cutting off the whole territory of Pakistan from the entire world by an economic blockade. In fact, a military blockade, a naval blockade was in fact planned by the Indian Navy. So here you have it, a three-pronged defensive maneuvering, all by the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force, the Indian Navy is now in operation. The entire military establishment of India is at work as the territorial integrity of India is at stake. Let's go forward. So, the mission objectives now. So, what was the Indian Army's approach? Well, a three-pronged approach. Number 1, contain. Number 2, evict. And number 3, deny. What do I mean by contain? To limit the intrusions up to the identified areas. Whichever area that they have come so far in, they are going to be thrown out from there. Deny, to evict Pakistan Army from the Indian side and to ensure that they do not have the ability or the capability to maintain or launch another counter-strike. With this particular objective, the Indian Army now starts its particular missions, assisted by the artillery regiments, Indian Air Force, you have the para-commandos that are put in, operatives from RAW, all of them working together to achieve this national objective. At many instances, you also find that even air power and field howitzers were unavailable to cause, in fact, not able to cause damage at all, which is why these tales of valor that we hear, this hand-to-hand combat where individuals eliminated more than 5 or 6 enemies at one time, well, this was a necessary requirement because of the environment, the climate, the whole ambient that was present during this particular war, right? So the only option, a frontal attack, as India had refused to cross the line of control. Thereafter, let's go forward. So, finally, after the Indian offensive, the counter-offensive, you have the pressure now building on Pakistan. They have not thought this through. So immediately, the Pakistan Prime Minister rushes to the United States to seek for help. What does he find there though is that his ideas are not being very accepted there. The then US President Bill Clinton categorically says that Pakistan needs to vacate the entire area before any sort of conclusion to this whole episode can be arrived at. Pakistan also faces criticisms from the G8, from its fair weather friends. Even China refuses to come to its aid. Right? So, US President Clinton refuses, and thus what happens is that both Pakistan and India, who were in fact nuclear capable by that time, so books and autobiographies mention that, well, the willingness to use these particular missiles could have been demonstrated, was being demonstrated as the Pakistani establishment was moving its nuke missiles towards the Indian border. Declassified reports also say that Indian government also had nukes on standby. So once again, you're looking at the world that was at the brink of a nuclear war. And yet, from the precipice of that war, it comes back because of the interventions of the United States President, and more importantly, the realization from the Pakistan government that they have landed themselves in a hot mess. Right? So, finally, on the 26th of July 1999, you have the announcement that all areas have been cleared and that Indian Army has now restored the sanctity of the line of control as per the Shimla Agreement of 1972. Right? Let's go forward. So, you have this particular episode, but the Param Yodhas, the individuals who made the ultimate sacrifice for the nation, who displayed indomitable courage in the face of adversity, conspicuous courage in fact. Individuals like Lieutenant Manoj Kumar Pandey, who was honored in fact with the Paramveer Chakra posthumously, Grenadier Yogendra Yadav, Captain Vikram Batra, again posthumously, and Rifleman Sanjay Kumar. 4 individuals, 4 Param Yodhas who were bestowed with the Paramveer Chakra. You also had 11 Mahavir Chakras that were given to individuals who had shown indomitable courage in the face of adversity. And more interestingly, what you find is that Pakistan goes ahead and also awards 2 individuals Nishan-e-Haider, their highest award. Now bear this in mind that Pakistan initially claimed that, well, the individuals who were present in the Indian side were not Pakistani army personnel, but in fact individual mujahideens. Well, do you give Nishan-e-Haider to individual mujahideens? Doesn't take long to figure out, right? So let's go forward. Initially now, after the whole war, the dust had settled on the war, then the Indian government goes ahead and launches a particular committee to look at the whole episode, analyze the whole episode. And guess who is in charge of the committee? K. Subramaniam, one of the most sharpest minds when it came to realpolitik, the father of our current External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. He is in charge of the Kargil Review Committee. What you also find is that the committee goes ahead and examines close to 100 individuals, including former prime ministers, to ascertain the sequence of events that led to this intelligence failure and the Kargil War happening. And the recommendations that come out of it are landmark. They change the whole security structure, the doctrine of security apparatus in the country. However, the Naresh Chandra Committee in 2011 also observed that a lot was pending in meeting the outcomes of this K. Subramaniam Committee. Right? So again, a very important point that you ought to remember from the examination perspective. Okay? So you can find this report, in fact, in the public domain. Only a certain part have been redacted because again, they pertain to national security. However, if you would like to go ahead and access this particular report, it is available on government platforms. Okay? So this led to large-scale restructuring of the Indian intelligence, the K. Subramaniam Committee. All right? So with that, my dear audience, my dear students, we come to the end of this brief video that I had for you, the timeline of the Kargil War. Today, the Kargil War Memorial stands proud and tall in Dras, where today the Defence Minister, Shri Rajnath Singh, was present. Also present family members of the martyrs, of all those individuals who made this war a success for India. And so before I wrap up, well, I can only wrap up with a prayer and gratitude in my heart for all those souls, those who served with distinction, those who left us in the course of their service during the Kargil War. For it's because of them that our freedom is protected. And so on that note, it's a wrap from me, Bhuvan A, as we took a look at the Kargil War on this special day, the Kargil Vijay Diwas. It's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Jai Hind. Good night.